All right, good morning and welcome everybody. It is the top of the hour. My name is Cory Owens. I am a soil scientist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of the United States Department of Agriculture. So excited to see everybody today. Welcome to our folks who've joined us live and welcome to our folks who are watching this recording. Many of our registrants today are actually in class right now, and so they can't tune in live, but we're excited that you're here and we're excited that you're going to check out this content. Welcome to the National Cooperative Soil Survey Partner Seminar. This is a series of topics of interest to people who love soil scientists or soil science across the country who want to learn more about our data, what soils is all about, how people can learn about soils, how soils is helpful for you and your jobs, and how soils can help our natural resources. So this is a series of seminars that we have for topics that range from geographic information systems to soil interpretations, and now it's soils in the classroom. So we're really excited to be joined by our partners who are going to be introducing themselves when they start to talk. But again, I just want to welcome everyone and go over some quick logistics. So we've got about 2 hours of our time stayed together. You're in a Teams meeting, which means that you were in a lobby, now you're in the meeting. You should have a chat option and you should have a Q&A option. Please use the Q&A for questions, and then as the sessions go on, our presenters can answer those questions either after their presentations if there's a little bit of time, or we'll have a bigger Q&A time at the end. But keep the questions coming throughout the presentations. I will say that several of our speakers today will be showing videos. Now, videos in a Teams meeting can be a little laggy and a little glitchy, maybe not our favorite viewing experience, depending on your internet and your streaming abilities. But we promise that for whatever happens on our recordings, we will be able to splice better quality videos in. But for today, bear with us. If your video experience is not ideal, we welcome you to join us and check out the content again on YouTube, because that's where this is going to land. There's the Soil Plant Science Division's YouTube channel, and the National Cooperative Soil Survey Partner Seminar has its own playlist where this will land with its other seminars we've had over the last year or so. So I am going to turn it over now to our first speaker, who is Lauren Brase, an education specialist with the American Geosciences Institute. And she's got some really cool info that she's going to be sharing with you.
Great. Thanks, Cory. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Looks great.
Awesome. Great. Well, yeah, thank you again. And hello, I'm Lauren Brase, an education specialist with the Education and Outreach team at the American Geosciences Institute. I'm thrilled to talk with you all today about how AGI has partnered with NRCS and the Soil Science Society of America, or SSSA, to support educators and outreach specialists in bringing soils into the classroom and also bringing educators out into the field. To get a sense of everyone that's tuning in live, would you please use the QR code or the link that Sequoia will be placing in the chat for the Slido? And we'd love to hear more about yourself and tell us what your role is today. And this Slido is only able to accept 100 people, and I see we have about 176 people logged in. So if you are beyond the 100th person to try and access this Slido, feel free to go ahead and put your answer in the chat, and we'll make sure we capture that too in sharing out the information about the seminar. So we have many soil scientists here today, and you can kind of see live how that Slido is reacting to all of your responses. And so really looking forward to talking with you all. As we predicted, there probably are less classroom teachers on the call right now, but hopefully you guys are tuning in live to a recording after school. We'll wait a couple seconds to see how this pans out, but I see many soil scientists, which is great because we're going to talk about a lot of soil resources that AGI, NRCS, and also SSSA have to offer that you can take in the classroom as outreach opportunities with those students. And as you're on that Slido, we have one more question for you that I'll move on. And again, you can still answer the Slido questions in the chat if you weren't able to log on. And using the same QR code, so you should just have the next question pop up, is what brings you to this event today? Or what is your interest in teaching about soils? And you can select more than one response. So if you are, again, just attending out of personal interest or growth, but also potentially going into a classroom soon, feel free to select as many as applicable. I love seeing the wanting to do more outreach. We're here to help. We're here to give ideas and, again, support you as you help integrate soils into our classrooms across the country. See, some people have a scheduled outreach event. That's awesome. Again, if you have any questions, I know that all of us on the call today, on the seminar today, are happy to help. We'll all be sharing our email addresses as our presentations occur. And then Cory will also follow up with the recording and also with all of the links and the resources. So feel free to reach out. I'm going to offer up anyone, but especially me at AGI, since I'm the one talking right now. If you do want more details after this seminar or resources, and we are happy to talk more about with you, whether it's just an email, a call. Again, we're willing to help and want to do what we can to get soils in the classroom. Great. Well, thank you. Thank you all again for your participation in that. And I'm hoping I can see the chat a little bit. Hopefully we have some action in the chat as well if you weren't one of those first 100 people to sign on to the Slido. So I'll get started, just giving a little bit more background about the American Geosciences Institute, or AGI. We are a nonprofit organization that represents and serves the geoscience community. We provide collaborative leadership and accessible information to connect earth science and people. We are a foundation of member societies, so we work with organizations. For example, the Soil Science Society of America, or SSSA, is one of our member societies who we've been working with for years. AGI is structured into 3 main departments. I'm an education specialist in the Education Outreach Department, where a major focus is supporting K-12 teachers and outreach specialists. We create geoscience resources such as curricula, webinars, posters, and more. And we also provide support through professional development programs, in-person workshops, conference sessions for teachers, outreach specialists, professional geoscientists, and the general public. One of our main initiatives is the Education and Outreach Department is Earth Science Week, which is a celebration of geosciences in general. AGI selects a theme each year to facilitate and focus the celebration around a particular geoscience topic of interest. We work with partners to develop media for educators and distribute materials each year. SSSA and NRCS have participated in and produced media for Earth Science Week for years. These include posters such as this poster, which was created for Geologic Map Day in 2022, along with calendar activities, activity pages, webinars, and more. You can visit the Earth Science Week webpage, which Sequoia will put in the chat, for collections of good geoscience resources, including soil-related resources and activities from AGI and our Earth Science Week sponsors and partners. And now for the focus more so on why we're actually here today, which is the importance of getting soil into the classroom. AGI put out a report in 2021, which predicted a shortage of 35,000 geoscientists by 2028. The report also discussed how early exposure to geoscience and engaging experiences are key to building interest in geoscience in general. More specifically, it will probably not come as a shock to many of you that soil scientists are in demand. And although this report from NRCS was from 2017, I don't doubt what was stated still holds true, in that more soil scientists are retiring faster than they are being replaced. And with the decline in student enrollment and changes in soil science degree programs, this tells us that finding qualified soil scientists is difficult. From AGI's work with teachers, we know that many teachers are thrust into teaching earth science and are looking for support. This is especially true when we talk with educators about soil. And if teachers are not comfortable with the content and the content itself isn't prevalent in schools, how are students supposed to be exposed and engaged in geoscience, and more specifically in soils? Good news is soil science is incredibly accessible to bring into a classroom. AGI, along with NRCS and SSSA, is dedicated to exposing and engaging students with soil throughout their education, and hopes they will consider soil science as a career, but will also take some geoscientist professionals more broadly. With soils being so relatable, place-based, engaging, hands-on, data-rich, and cross-disciplinary, there are so many ways to include them in science classes and beyond. And since you are here attending this webinar, I bet you already recognize the value of including soils in your teaching or doing outreach. And we're here today to support you and provide you with resources and ideas. AGI works with many organizations that are promoting the importance of soils and have resources specifically for a K-12 audience. We promote what is already available through our Science Week, on social media, at conferences, during professional developments, and whenever we're interacting with teachers. And if we see a gap that we can fill, we create new resources and offer professional development opportunities on behalf of NRCS. These resources and experiences are grounded in real-world challenges. They're hands-on, incorporate real scientific practices, techniques. They incorporate data, mostly from Web Soil Survey, which I'll talk more about later. And we definitely focus on increasing the awareness of soil-related careers and creating immersive experiences. I'll briefly share some of AGI's resources, which you can find all on our webpage that Sequoia will put in the chat. So if I click here, I'm brought, hopefully, to our homepage for AGI, or Education Outreach. You'll find some of our opportunities for educators, outreach materials for those of you that are professionals, publications, and then we're going to go to K-12 resources. You scroll down, you can see some of the different content we offer. We're going to click here on soil-related resources. The chat, or the link that Sequoia put in the chat, will just bring you right to this site. So you can see some information here just about the organization and our partnership with NRCS. And I'll briefly, again, I know we only have a couple minutes left in my section, but share some of our opportunities for teachers. And this is updated as soon as opportunities become available. We have our soil science workshop, which started a couple of years ago, and this is for secondary science teachers, and it will this year be at Purdue University in June. Check back here in February for application information and more details. We also have a soil ambassador program, which is going to be sunsetting soon. And so if you are an educator or a teacher that has soil related resources that you'd love to share at a conference or a workshop that you need travel support for, please apply now so that we can help get you to different conferences and locations to share your resources. We have a collection of soil related lessons. All of the ones here include some web soil survey data because we do, again, want to strive to include that data when possible. Some of our newer lessons were based on research projects with teachers and students, like our soil aggregate stability lesson, our soil katina lesson, and capillary action in soil. One of my favorite lessons is in observing impacts that communities built on permafrost, which if I click on any of these, I'll be brought to a PDF, which gives some background on the lesson, gives the standards, which Missy will talk about shortly, about how soils can be incorporated into different state standards, gives a hands-on activity. It gives some questions and analysis for students, and then also how we can extend that activity further. And then in this case, we have some soil maps related to permafrost. And this is pretty common in most of our lessons. We also have some soil related activities, the soil profile, painting with soil, and soil colors and crayon making. And our updated versions of the 3 lessons that are available currently on NRCS's website. We've just made them a little bit more in line with today's standards and the questions that teachers and students are asking. Couple activity pages too, just for quick activities in the classroom that we've worked with outreach professionals to do and scientists to get into the classroom, and those were offered through our Science Week. We have some web soil survey teacher guides because it's a wonderful platform that I'll share more about in a little bit or later today in the seminar, but we need some guides to help guide teachers and even students into using this wealth of information that's available on the platform. Some of our newer resources are our virtual field experiences. So obviously the best way to get kids interested in soil is to get them feeling soil, touching, experiencing it, and especially outside. But if you're stuck inside or it's negative 50-degree wind chill, as it was this week, and you want to get students, again, still aware of soils, you can bring them to one of our virtual field experiences. There's one in the Driftless region, which was in Platteville, Wisconsin. And then we just finished up our Corvallis, Oregon, and these correlate with where we've had soil science workshops in the past. And then we have student guides that go along with these virtual field experiences that students are held accountable for what they're learning. We have worked with the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources when we went into their organization and we worked with them on different topics. One of those kits that we put together was on soils, and it has a variety of activities where geoscience professionals have gone into classrooms and are able to interact with students. And you can see this other soil colors, texture, erosion, filter, and soil is alive, looking at respiration for different grade levels. And so if you're looking to do outreach and need some quick activities, this would be a great place to start. It does relate to the Pennsylvania state standards, which are the Pennsylvania steels, but many state standards, if they're not the next generation science standards, are related to that. And so again, it's pretty cross-disciplinary, but if you need help connecting it to your state's standards, feel free to reach out and I can help with that. We also have a rain garden curriculum, which includes components about soil. And so we have some of those resources available here. And I'll go through that briefly when we talk about web soil survey a little bit more. We also focus on soil related careers. For Earth Science Week 2 years ago, we created a soil and plant sciences careers poster, which was led by Heather Owens and did a wonderful job highlighting some of these projects and some of these careers across the country. So this is available still, I believe, on the NRCS website and available online, obviously, for people to print and through AGI storefront through our Earth Science Week kit from last year or 2 years ago. We also put on a webinar series with USGS about early career professionals and mapping. 3 of those webinars featured soil scientists. And so if you're looking to promote different careers, again, along with the poster, we have these longer webinars which are available for you. They start with about 20 minutes or so of a presentation from the professional, and then we have an interview for about 20 minutes or 30 minutes with them, getting kind of a more casual look at their career and their background, and then about a 10-minute Q&A session with the audience. And then again, AGI is not for sure the only organization to promote soil scientists and have resources. There are many, many other organizations out there that have a ton of resources, and we'll hear more from SSSA later today. NRCS has some good resources already. We also compiled all of NRCS's resources because, as many of you know, being in different states, the different states have their own educational resources. We have collected and compiled those and put them on our educational GeoSource database, which I'll share more about shortly. And then, of course, we have all these different organizations that have soil resources, and so we hope to promote those different external libraries with tons and tons of information. So I'll jump back quickly to some of our new resources and opportunities. We are in the process of creating quick 5-minute or less videos about different soil related activities. So if you are prepping for a lesson and you want to do the permafrost lesson, for example, but you read the lesson plan and you have some questions or you want to know how a real teacher's done it, it's a quick 3 to 5 minute video which talks about what they've done, how they've set it up, and any questions or any details that are helpful from someone who's actually done the lesson. We have one so far. It's about soil painting, which we'll play for you later today. As I mentioned, our Soil Ambassador program is ending soon. Please apply if you're interested in getting some travel support to present K-12 soil activities and resources at an educational conference. We also have our soil science workshop coming up, and then also we have more resources always coming soon. So feel free to check back on the website, or you can follow us on social media and we promote those as they're available. And as I briefly mentioned, AGI has our database Education GeoSource, which shares a variety of resources about geoscience, including organizations, grants, professional development opportunities, really you name it. There are a couple soil-related curated collections you can browse for activity and lesson ideas from SSSA and NRCS. So I'll recommend heading over there to look at the many resources that are shared. And I'll wrap up by briefly speaking to those of you who said you have many soil-related resources or that you already have resources that you'd like to maybe share. We continuously add resources to EGS, so please share them with us so we can make them accessible to a broader audience. And if it's in a form that maybe it's an email or, a loose lesson plan or just ideas, we're happy to fine tune those and get them more official or, ready to be shared to a broader scale. And more on that note, we would love to collaborate with anyone that would like to collaborate with us, whether it's educators, university professors, professionals, and anyone else with soil-related knowledge or resources to share. My email will pop up on the next slide. Please feel free to reach out. And some other ways you can promote teachers incorporating soils into their teaching includes working with teachers or students directly, sharing resources with us, as I mentioned, which AGI can then share through either Education GeoSource or Science Week, or even getting involved in our Science Week yourself. With that, I will end and just thank you all for your attention listening in. Here's that Soils career poster one more time, and I'll be happy to take a couple questions if there are any.
Thank you so much. Let's give Lauren a round of applause. We'll be hearing from Lauren again later in the seminar. I believe all the questions have been covered in the chat so far. Would anyone, if 1 minute, if anyone's got another question for Lauren you want to post in the chat, now's your time. And of course, Lauren will be on the whole seminar and can check chats later. All right, we're going to move on. Next up, we have Missy Holzer, Chair of the Soil Science Society of America. Lauren's been saying SSSA, that's the Soil Science Society of America. Missy is the chair of the K-12 committee and a science standards consultant. We're super excited to have Missy here to join us today for the seminar. Missy, you are up.
Okay. Can you see the poll?
Yes.
Oh,
there we go.
Okay. All right. Well, I can't see anything that you all are seeing. So let's give it a shot. Hi, everybody. My name is Missy Holzer, and I'm delighted to be here to get into the weeds with you, or maybe dig into the soil with you related to the standards that most of our country is teaching by in science, but also just loving soil science. So a quick poll for you. Please rate. I see people are popping in. Your comfort level with what's called 3D teaching and learning. You're going to find that there's acronyms, tons and tons of acronyms out there, and little little things that are a part of a lexicon of those of us that are science education nerds. And 3D teaching and learning is one of those. So we have 50% that are in category 4. My students are figuring out phenomena using science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts out of 4. Let's see, we have people that are at the lower end. And again, the poll will only accept 100 participants like Lauren's. So if you're not getting it into the poll, don't worry about it. It's okay. We're getting a little bit of a sense as to your comfort level with 3D teaching and learning. Okay, so we have it across the spectrum. So, what is 3D teaching and learning? We'll talk about that momentarily. Okay, so we're about 2.7. Thanks, everybody. Let's try one more question. And the next one over here. Okay, and then this actually should have been our first one. What is your knowledge of the next generation science standards? And I didn't use the acronym there. I didn't use NGSS. What is your knowledge of it? So 1, no idea what they are. Thank you for being honest. This is anonymous, so yes, please be candid with your ratings. Okay, this is great. I've been using them since they've been published. 2014 is when they were published. All right, keep going. Keep going. All right, so it looks like we're at a 1.6. All right, so I think let's go ahead and move in, and I think this is a perfect place for me to stop the polls and jump right on in with the content. And here we go. Well, for me, soils and NGS, they are perfect together. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the next generation science standards has a long history. If you were an educator in the 1990s, you were asked to correlate your teaching to the benchmarks from AAAS with benchmarks for science literacy, or the science education standards. They were national standards that were created back then. Prior to that, it was like whatever you wanted to do. It was the Wild West of teaching science. But it was nice that in the 1990s, we started coming together and thinking critically about what's important for our students to learn as they move forward. Something else that happened in the 90s too was the onset of a full domain full domain of learning, which was the learning sciences. It's a field of study that really digs into how people learn, whether you're learning in formal settings, informal settings. So the field of the learning science is somewhat young. That's the area where I did my research, and I'm very curious and I'm very interested in how students learn, and I'm interested in what scaffolds and what we can do to support student learning. So all of that was kind of taking place in the 1990s, the early 2000s. And then the thought was, hey, we need to come together and freshen up this framework, because we know that students learn better if they learn science better if they marry together some what are called science and engineering practices along with what are called cross-cutting concepts. No longer do we want students to memorize what is in a textbook. There's a time and place for a little bit of that memorization. Shoot, I remember my timetables from back in 3rd grade, but going into science, perhaps there's a better way to learn science. And that's what the framework for K-12 science education calls to task. In the framework for K-12 science education, that kind of lays out the groundwork. It takes all of that research in the learning sciences and puts it in one place. If you were going to start your journey in learning about NGSS, I would suggest grabbing this National Academy Press free PDF and using that as a place to start. So that framework was first written. When that was written, that served as the foundation, what it was to become the next generation science standards. So teams of professionals came together and they wrote what we call the next generation science standards. That took a number of years, and I was on the state review panel for New Jersey. So I kind of saw, and I was on the standards panel for New Jersey since 2008. So I saw this whole evolution of science standards and teaching and learning throughout my teaching career as a classroom educator, right on up through the adoption of the next generation science standards. And like good science, the work is never finished. So we have the next generation science standards, and they've been active since 2014 and out there and being used, but we're still doing research. The field of learning sciences didn't stop their work once the framework was written. No, it's continuing and continuing. And those are some of the handbooks that are all free downloads from National Academy Press, and they'll support you in your journey with NGSS. So what makes them a little bit different? So they should reflect this interconnected nature of science as it's practiced in the real world. So I know we've got so many soil scientists online today, and what I want you to think about is how you actually practice your field out in the field and out in the laboratory. And that's what we want students to do. You're figuring out stuff out there in the field. We want students to figure out stuff in their classroom. And how do they do that? They do that with the science and engineering practices. So when we say NGSS or Next Generation Science Standards, they're students' performance expectations. You'll see what that looks like momentarily. And it's not curriculum. Curriculums, nobody wants to be in the business of writing curriculum for a district. I know here in my lovely state of New Jersey, we are a home rule state, and so we have over 500 school districts, and each one of them can write their own curriculum. However, they've got to be able to meet the standards that are in our state standards. But they're guidance, they're just guidance. So the big piece that we take in from the field of the learning science is that these science concepts build in what's called a learning progression from grades K right up to 12. So if we look at what we want students to learn in high school, well, what do they need to learn in middle school to get there? What do they need to learn in grades 3 to 5 to get there? What do they need to learn in kindergarten through grades 2 to get there? So this is what we call a learning progression. So we see how those concepts build with student learning over the grades. And it's deeper understanding of content as well as the application of content. And so you're going to find that we have a whole set of core ideas related to engineering. So we want the students to be able to apply. Engineering doesn't stand alone. No, it's that it's connected directly with the science. Okay, and they're integrated. And then just a caveat, they were not written to provide angst for our science educators and curriculum developers. Instead, they were designed for students we want them to be ready for college, for career, and for citizenship. And then Lauren mentioned before that, there's this lovely place for soil across curricula. Well, so too with NGSS, that there's a lovely place to connect with other subject areas, and definitely with English and language arts and with math. So we say that these areas in NGSS are intertwined. We call them dimensions. And so the practices, the core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts, each one of these is a dimension. And what we want to see is them intertwined. And so in the old classroom, in the 1990s and prior to the standards, we did if you walked into a classroom, they were learning about something. Well, now we want to see students actually trying to figure stuff out. We want them to be answering questions, to be scratching their heads, and to be figuring out ways to answer their questions. And so therefore, those scientific practices definitely play a central role. And then not only are the core ideas organized in learning progression, so are the cross-cutting concepts. And so if we look at that patterns, what do we want a kindergartner to learn about patterns versus a high school student to learn about patterns? What about questioning? What would a questioning look like for a kindergartner versus a questioning for a high school student? And they're written, as I mentioned, as performance expectations. And then we mentions that we want these all to be integrated. And it's the focus is on how and not necessarily the why comes in later. So in front of you are the science and engineering practices. There are 8 of them. And if you think about how, again, my soil scientists that are in the audience, how you attack a question, you're starting to come up with that really good question. And then I know when asking questions, every single word in those questions means something. When you ask a good question, that should kind of lead us into an investigation. Well, then we're going to be looking at developing and using models, and there's so many ways that we can develop and use models. Planning and carrying out investigations is going to look so different for our soil scientists as compared to a bench scientist, like a microbiologist or a bench chemist in a pharmaceutical lab. Analyzing and interpreting data, using math and computational thinking, constructing explanations, and designing solutions for engineering, engaging in argument from evidence. Now, that one is one that's a little bit of a challenge, is that we want students to really, really apply what they've figured out in the numbers 1 through 6 in the practices when they get to number 7. And then also, in this world of information, we want them to really be able to be critical of information. Oops, excuse me. And then with the cross-cutting concepts, oh my goodness, asking questions. Oh, these are the wrong ones. I apologize. Those are not cross-cutting concepts. Those are those are the science and engineering practices. But in a quick rundown for the 7 cross-cutting concepts, I will make sure that Cory has the right slide deck, then I'll correct this slide. Students, patterns is the first one. The second one is cause and effect. The third one is scale, proportion, and quantity. The fourth one is systems and system models. The fifth one is energies and flows and cycling. The sixth one is structure and function. And finally, the one is stability and change. So those are the 7 cross-cutting concepts. When we look at the disciplinary core ideas, it doesn't look like there's much here. You'll see that there's quite a bit in a second. So life science, there are 4 core ideas. In physical science, there's 4. Earth and space science, there's 3. And engineering, there's 2. A little bit more as we progress. When we look at what's called a performance expectation, each one of them, as they're written, if you were to dig into the weeds with these, you would see a sheet. And I'll show that in a second, that can be quite daunting for those of you that are new to NGSS, but the performance expectation is written and above, but each performance expectation has a science and engineering practice incorporated into it, a disciplinary core idea, and a cross-cutting concept. If you go to the live version of these on the Next Gen Science website, if you roll your mouse over them, you'll actually see each one of those dimensions pop up. And then there's also connection boxes. So it's connections to other science disciplines, some other DCIs, disciplinary core ideas that lead into this one, and then also ones for the kids that are older, and then also the connections with math and science. Oh my goodness, this is it. This is what they look like, and you can see they're pretty detailed, but over time they do make sense. So these are performance expectations, and I want to put in the caveat that these are endpoints for a grade band. So with NGSS, when we look at the progressions, they're divided by grade band, and so it's grades K through 2, and then grades 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and then 9 through 12. When we look at a performance expectation, these are end of the grade band endpoints. So by the end of middle school, we would like students to be able to do this, or we want students to be able to do what's here. So it could take 3 years in order to fully unpack across different classes and different topics for them to actually flush all of this out. So I mentioned, and then so if you're looking at content that has been, that a performance expectation has been added to it, we always look at it as building proficiency towards, and we're always building towards that proficiency. We're never going to nail in one lesson or one unit, one performance expectation. So I mentioned, if you go to the live version, if you roll your mouse over each one of these little parts of this performance expectation, they'll turn color, and then they'll also be activated and point down to one of these, or what are called boxes, content boxes. And so evaluate competing design solutions. So they evaluate competing. So right in here, we already see that it's engaging an argument from evidence, and that's evaluating competing design solution. The language is taken right out of there. Maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem services. So that touches on a few of what we call elements, life science elements. And then finally, we're looking at systems. We're looking at, or stability and change. We're looking at maintaining. The term maintaining kind of points us to stability and change. So I mentioned that the performance expectations are in a progression. So if we look at the bottom here, this specific one for physical science has been assigned to second graders. And you can see that it starts at the very basic level. Analyze data obtained from testing different materials to determine which materials have properties that are best suited for some kind of intended purpose. And then that's going to allow students to prepare and have an understanding before they go into fifth grade. That fifth grade teacher is going to assume that the student is coming to him or her have the proficiency in that grade 2 performance expectation. So they're ready in grade 5 to make observations and measurements to identify materials based on their properties. And all of that leads into, at middle school, analyze and interpret data on the properties of substances before and after the substance interact to determine if a chemical reaction has occurred. And then finally, in high school, it gets a little bit more complicated. And this is the first time they see the periodic table, and they look at it as a model to predict the relative properties of elements based on the patterns of electrons and the outermost energy levels of atoms. So that is a progression over time. All right. So how many of you are responsible for, if you're writing curricula, designing curricula, to include that NGSS? And you can see that all of this, almost all of the states minus one, and I'm going to say that, even Texas are adaptive. So the purple states, they are the adopted NGSS, and all of the blue ones are all standards based on the framework. We say that they're adaptive, except for Florida. I'm going to say that Florida, their last round of review was 2008. That's their standards are from 2008, and they're going through that review process right now. So I'm kind of curious as to see what the new standards are going to look like for Florida. They might be our 50th state. So I think it's going to make sense for us to kind of have an understanding of NGSS. But what about soils? Where can we put it? Well, in life science, it has a natural home in ecosystems, interactions, energy, and dynamics. Physical science, it has a natural connection with matter and its interactions. And these aren't I don't want to put limitations on here. I want you to think creatively on where you can pop it into other places as well. Earth and space science, we've got a super home for it in not only one core idea, but two, in our Earth systems as well as Earth and human activity. And then I'm going to argue that we can also include engineering when we're looking at soils as related to the other subject areas. Typically, when we're using the engineering core ideas, what we want to do is marry it over to one of the other content areas. Okay. All right, I hope you're all still with me on this. So now we're going to get into a little bit more of the details. And so, if we go back to this page, if we look at each one of those and I ask you, what does that include? And how does that differ from grades kindergarten right up through high school? Well, let's take a look at what's called a matrix. And this is how it looks as we make our way across the higher grades. This is for life science, and this is for the first one, from molecules to organisms, structures, and processes, but it's all a learning progression. So these little segments that have been cordoned off, you can see that that's all one progression of knowledge building over time. You will be given all the links to these documents so that you can work with them. Okay, and this is just an example of physical science as how it progresses over time. And I'm going to argue that if we look at PS1B, that is a great place for soil science. And that's where we have chemical reactions. Okay, so let's make our own performance expectation. Instead, I'm not going to really call it a performance expectation because I'm going to say that this is going to be good enough for an objective. In an NGSS classroom, when you walk into it, students should be full of energy and trying to figure things out. And so this is an objective that we would like the students to figure out. So students are going to construct an explanation based on evidence from an investigation on soil color. All of that is connected to SEP 6.4. And then they're going to identify the cause and effect relationship between chemical changes and color changes found in soil. So all of that is connected, and you can see that if you were to walk into that classroom, this is what we're looking at. And this has actually been defined for middle school. It would be a very active classroom for this objective. And this objective would probably take at least one class period, if not 2 class periods. And in the case of life science, we're going to be looking at food webs and models right there. And so here is a sample objective. Ask questions that can be investigated to determine the role of soil in cycling of the nutrients in a local ecosystem. So again, we've got our SEP in there, our cross-cutting concept in there, as well as our content area. And so this is what it looks like unpacked. And so if we were to walk into a classroom, those middle school students would be learning how to ask a good question that can be investigated. They'll be thinking about how matter is conserved when they look at this whole cycling. And then if we look at that last element for life science, that's huge. We're only going to be looking at a small piece of it. Transfers of energy, of matter into and out of the physical environment occurred at every level. In the case of earth science, we're going to look at the ESS2C down at the bottom here, where water is connected to the systems. And here's a sample objective for that. Develop and use a model to demonstrate the role of water in an earthquake that caused liquefaction. Again, we have our model in there, our SEP, science and engineering practice, is modeling. Our cross-cutting concept is cause and effect. And our soil, earth science is water's movement on land and underground. All right, shoo. So where to begin with NGSS? The question is, are you designing curriculum, or were you reviewing, vetting, or tagging previously designed and implemented curriculum? So if you're designing curriculum, what I'd like you to think about are those grade bands and look at what students are capable of learning and doing. And so students develop science skills over the years. So I want you to think about critically and almost put up a boundary layer for yourself for that particular grade band. And also come up with some interesting things for students to figure out. If you're vetting or reviewing or tagging curriculum, I would suggest doing this first. I would ask this question first. Are the materials actually 3-dimensional? If not, then maybe don't even bother, or consider rewriting them. And are they at grade level? So something to think about. Some resources for reviewing, for digging in. Designing and reviewing for the NGSS classroom. So I would like you to quickly review some examples that have already been curated as high quality instructional materials, and there'll be some links that'll be shared with you. Keep a review tool. There's a tool called the NGSS Lesson Screener. Keep that handy when you're writing and designing your curricula. If you're looking for resources that have been connected, I'm going to send you to the soilsforteachers.org. We've connected our materials to NGSS, and Susan's going to take you on a tour of that. She'll show you the middle school unit. She'll show you our database, and then she'll also show you our teacher's guide. And with that, I know that was a little bit of a fire hose of NGSS, but I hope it gave you a little bit of insight into why they're important and how we want our students to learn with them. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Missy. There's been some questions in the chat, but they've been kind of community answered. One question, and you can have a chance to expand on this. What do you do with students who enter a grade band unprepared to move on to this band? And thanks for the folks who kind of gave their insights on what they do, but from your perspective as a curriculum developer, what's a way to do that?
Yeah, so when I design curriculum, the very first thing I do, it's 2 things I do. First, I put in prerequisite knowledge when I'm designing curricula, but also I build into it a prior knowledge check. So like if the very first part of the lesson is to unpack what students already know. So I encourage those that are actually writing and designing curricula to do that. Take that first part of your first lesson as an opportunity to really figure out what students know coming into this. And that will give you an idea what you need to scaffold and how you need to support students for the rest of the lesson.
Awesome. Now I'm going to turn it back to Lauren, and this is going to be the video portion. So be prepared for some fun videos. Lauren, you're up.
Thanks, Cory. And thanks, everyone. Thanks, Missy, for that rundown of NGSS in connection to soils. I'm excited to share 3 teachers' recordings about how they include soils in their teaching. And these are quick, about 5 to 10 minutes. And first up, we'll hear from Laura Kirby, who is a high school teacher in Tinley Park, Illinois, outside of Chicago. And she'll share how she includes soils in her AP Environmental Science course.
Hello, my name is Laura Kirby, and I love soil. I am a teacher at Andrew High School in Tinley Park, Illinois. I teach AP Environmental Science, which is an 11th and 12th grade class that is, the curriculum is governed by College Board, so I don't get to choose what I teach. And then we are also dual credit, so I also have to work closely with our local community college in terms of our curriculum. But soil is a big part in pretty much every unit that I teach in that class. So I like to get the kids rolling in the dirt right away, literally and figuratively. So the first thing I do with them is I tell them that we're all just going to touch soil. This comes as a shock to some kids because this is a very suburban school. They're not the type of kids to be playing outside in the dirt, and they think I'm crazy when I tell them that they're going to touch soil. I do it in the classroom. I bring in a big bin. I just put a bunch of potting soil in there, and we all gather around. I tell them to get their hands in there and then just start touching it, feeling it, notice the textures, notice the scent, just notice any emotions that come up. And I talk to them about how there's good soil bacteria in there that can help lift your mood. It can actually boost serotonin levels in your brain. So that's a nice hook, and they get really excited about that. And once I tell them that, they're willing to stick their hands in that soil and get dirty. So that's how I introduce them to it. From there, I try to stick to the interest grabbing activities so that they could still fall in love with the soil before they continue learning about it. And so the next activity I do with them is the Soil Your Undies lesson. If you've seen that before, it's where you get a giant pair of tidy whities and you find the mass of these, and then you bury them in the dirt. You let it sit for weeks to months, and then you retrieve it and you find the new mass and you see how much decomposition has happened. So you can do this as like an inquiry if you want to test different soil locations, like maybe next to the parking lot versus a garden soil, or north side of the school versus south side of the school. You can put any kind of spin on this you want, but the students think it's really, it's kind of fun. You got some big old tidy whities and you get to see how they decompose. They get really excited to see the end product of this, and it works pretty well. So one warning though, just make sure you save yourself enough time if you live in a place that has winter, because I made that mistake last year as I buried it too close to winter and then we couldn't unbury it because the ground was frozen. So leave yourself some time. And this helps us learn about all the cycles. So I introduced the carbon cycle and the role of soil in that, the nitrogen cycle, the role of soil in that, and they can see it firsthand what's happening with these undies. From there, we learn about the properties of soil. So we learn about soil textures, like we do the feel test just in our hands, where we take soil and we roll it into a ribbon and they get to feel all the different textures with the flow chart. We look at soil pH, we look at soil fertility. I like to use the Rapid Test digital soil test kit. It comes with little capsules, like the reagents are little capsules, and then you can get solutions that you use the meter to read you about pH, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And these are helping us to compare different soils. So we might take some of the soil samples that we planted where our undies went and then compare. Do they have the same amount of nitrogen? Do they have the same pH? We also look at their temperatures. I have a soil thermometer. They each get one of these, and we go outside and we find the temperatures of the soil. And we see, does that play any sort of role? once they get kind of all of this information about what soil properties are, they start to build their own ecosystem in a bottle. And we keep adding stuff to it throughout the year and learning about how that impacts the soil and the ecosystem itself. So we'll plant a legume in there, and then we'll start measuring the nitrogen levels and seeing how the legume impacts the nitrogen levels in the soil. We will put some pill bugs in there for decomposition, some worms. We'll put nitrogen heavy plants, the ones that feed all the nitrogen, like corn in there, and we measure the nitrogen levels to see the impacts of that. And this is a semester long project, so they do that all throughout first semester, and they really get into it. They love this project. We do it, it's called an eco column, where it's like a 3-level ecosystem with a terrestrial chamber on the top, and that's where the soil is, obviously. But they also have guppies in their bottom aquatic chamber, and they love that. From there, we start to talk more about soil diversity and linking that to different biomes around the world. And, why does the soil in the rainforest have so much acid in it? Why is it so acidic? Why does the soil in the Midwest, why is it so fertile? So we look at all of these different variations and learn about biome characteristics and how that impacts the soil as well. And then vice versa, how the soil impacts the life that can live in those biomes. I show the movie Kiss the Ground so that we can see, well, what does soil do for us humans, and why do we need to protect it? What is it about soil that we care about? And so that brings us into conversations about agriculture. The kids set up their own little farms, using what they learned from their eco columns to keep their soil healthy. And then we talk soil conservation on a global scale and get into all of the things that we as humans on this planet need to be mindful of in order to make sure that we have our soil long-term to continue growing crops for our population. So I love teaching this class. I love incorporating soils into the class. And like I said, the kids at first are kind of hesitant about it, and they think I'm crazy when I say that I love soil. By the end of the year, though, they also love soil. So I hope you give some of these labs a try, and best of luck. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you to Laura. Hopefully you got a good insight as to all of her great resources she has to offer. Next up, we are going to hear from Trenton Young, who is a high school science teacher located in Salt Lake City, Utah. And he's going to share with you how he integrates soils in his botany and biology courses.
Hello, my name is Trent Young. I teach botany and biology at Hunter High School in Salt Lake City, Utah. I've taught here for 5 years. I teach soils in my classes because they have a great connection to a lot of the curriculum standards, especially those involving conservation and plant requirements. I love providing hands-on curriculum to my students and focusing on the science and engineering practices, which are part of the next generation science standards. Soils are a great way of doing that, of teaching that. I'm most passionate about having my students participate in rigorous student research. Using soils to accomplish this is an easy and cost-effective way to help my students conduct their own research. Students in my botany class use biochar, mycorrhiza, bokashi compost, effective microorganisms, and different soil components to complete a seedling investigation project that I incorporate into all of my botany classes. They just planted them a couple days ago when that's all of this going in investigation. One of the first labs that I started doing here with my students was a simple one where they separate soil samples into different components, the sand and silt and clay. And then they weigh the parts and figure out the percentages. They also test permeability and make observations while looking at different soil types under a microscope. Early this year, we received a grant for a small school garden. My students and I have some exciting plans to conduct some bigger research projects and problem-based learning. Another grant supplied us with a soil testing kit. We collected samples at a nature center which had recently opened. The filter they used was from a construction site across the street. So we're excited to collect and analyze data about the soil in that site and see how it improves as more organic matter incorporates into the soil. We're also working with the local Water Conservancy organization to develop and incorporate curriculum focused on water conservation. A lot of this involves grass conversion and soil improvement with the goal of reducing water use for landscape. 4 years ago, I received a grant. We were able to purchase the supplies to start a couple of worm bins in my classroom. They've been going ever since. Basically, worm bins are a way of composting organic waste faster and introduce beneficial microorganisms into the soil when you incorporate the worm castings. I think they're perfect for a classroom. They don't produce any unpleasant smells or unwanted pests as long as you follow a few key rules. In my worm bins, I use coconut coir and shredded cardboard as the bedding for the worms. A lot of people will recommend peat moss over coconut coir, but if I use the coconut coir, it can lead to good discussions with my students about non-renewable versus renewable resources, also about the carbon cycle and carbon banks. So that's why we prefer the coconut coir. We don't use any peat in the classroom here. I use red wiggler worms. They're good converters of food waste to soy or worm castings pretty quickly. I haven't tried any other worms, but it could be a good student research project in the future. We use our worms as a way to turn waste that would otherwise end up in the landfill into a valuable product. Right now, my students focus exclusively on producing worm castings. If we can get more space, I'd love to experiment a little bit with worm breeding as well. It's pretty much the same process, but just a few tweaks to do that. Right. Well, we started the worm bins 4 years ago. Approached the cafeteria to see if we could collect some of the food scraps when they prepare the food. I was kind of shocked. They said everything that they get in is already prepackaged and prepared. So they didn't produce any food scraps that we could use. So I had to approach the family and consumer science teachers. And when they teach their cooking classes, they've agreed to let the students save the food waste. We give them some Ziploc bags. They throw it in the freezer, and then it stays in there until my students go down and collect it. And then we bring it up here and put it in our worm bins. It takes anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks for a banana peel or an apple core to turn into the worm castings. This is kind of a mix. You can see a few worms in there. This is a banana peel that I threw in there about 6 weeks ago, and it's almost completely gone. This is one that an apple core I put in a couple days ago, and still pretty much the way it looked. Takes anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks for a banana core or a banana peel or an apple core to be converted completely into the worm castings. Depending on how much food we put in, we use a sieve to separate the worms from the worm castings. It can get a little bit wet, and it's a little bit hard to sieve if that's the case. So one trick I found is if you get the compressed peat pellets, that's one place where we do use peat, and just put them in the bottom. They absorb the water, and the next day the worm castings are quite a bit dried out, a lot easier to sift and separate. Science instruction probably looks quite a bit different than when you took science in high school. The next generation science standards have three main dimensions, three main components. One is the disciplinary core ideas, and they talk about science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts. What I love about the way this is taught now is that these cross-cutting concepts and the science and engineering practices, they're the same in any science class that a student takes from kindergarten until they graduate high school. So focusing on those helps them no matter what science class they take. The cross-cutting concepts that works best for worm bins is matter and energy. Students can observe matter going into the worm bins as food waste. Over a period of a few weeks, they can see how it's transformed into a different form of matter, which are the worm castings. They can also see how chemical energy within the food waste is transformed into heat energy as the food waste is broken down and the worms use cellular respiration to create body heat. In my biology class, there are a couple of lessons where I focus on the worm bins. The first one involves a standard where students need to develop a model that explains how energy and matter cycle through an ecosystem. The worm bin itself serves as an excellent model because it's basically an ecosystem in a tub. My students start from scratch and research how to create a worm bin and how to maintain it. They also identify the matter and energy that enters the bin and leaves the bin. They relate how food waste becomes worm castings, which can be used to grow food again. The second main lesson that I focus on the worm bins is one where students need to analyze and interpret data to describe how changes in major nutrient cycles affect plants. I always have a handful of students who start out in my botany class by conducting an investigation with worm castings as the independent variable. We can use the data from these students and analyze it to construct an explanation. We can also use the soil testing kits to measure the NPK of the soil in the control and experiment. Overall, using worm bins in my classroom provides so many more meaningful and hands-on experiences for my students than they would get by just giving them data or information. There are also several demonstrations that I use the worm bins as a demonstration or illustration of some topic, even if it's not like the main focus of the lesson. So it's very powerful to dissolve some of the worm castings in a little bit of water, and then dissolve bag potting soil in water. And then students take a drop of each of those and look at it under the microscope. And the microorganisms that are visible with the worm castings, it's amazing to compare the two. And they can see that if you have all these little creatures that are contributing to the ecosystem and that are decomposers and that are going through that energy and matter cycle, how much healthier that soil can be. Another demonstration with powerful impact involves I just tie a string onto a banana peel or an apple core, and I put it in here, and then every week we look at it, we pull it out and we look at it, and every week it shrinks and gets smaller, and students can track and they can see what's happening as that organic food waste is turned into worm castings. They're usually amazed at how quickly it can just disappear. If things are optimal, it's about 3 weeks. And so they're pretty amazed that it can go from this waste that would have been in the landfill to something beneficial in just 3 weeks. Thank you so much for letting me share my classroom with you. Most teachers absolutely love to collaborate with experts in different science fields. It could be as simple as giving students a brief background on what you do in your job, or something more complex like involving students in some project-based learning. With an investigation you're currently performing, thanks for listening. I'm excited to finding ways to collaborate with experts like you.
So next up, we'll hear from Julie Camp, who's a middle school teacher outside of Birmingham, Alabama. She was featured in AGI's first science short video and will share about her soil painting activity.
Hi, my name is Julie. I teach 6th grade Earth and Space Science as well as AP Environmental Science. So I do this activity with 6th graders and 11th and 12th graders, and they both really enjoy it. I use this to follow the soil painting activity, to follow soil texture by field test. So for that, I've already laid the tables out with parchment paper, which I just buy in long rolls. I cut it, and then I use painter's tape to tape it down to the tables. And they have a bucket, a container that has for them to make a mess in. They have some soil at each table, and they have a glass of water at each table already. They mix the soil texture by feel over this bucket. I show them that step by step. I have the soil texture by feel flow charts out for them, as well as printed on my screen. So they've already made a mess. They've had a super fun time doing the texture soil by feel. This parchment paper is already getting a bit messy, and they already have one of my soil samples in this container with water. So we already have one of their paints mixed. I have pre-ground 4 different soil samples from all in the neighboring areas. So I have one from the garden at our school, one from outside the wooded area in our school, one from my front and my backyard. And they're all very different colors, even though they were collected very close to each other. And I grind them up, and then I put them in these little containers. I give each group one of those containers with some different colors to paint with. I also give them a container to mix that in. So I already had these little plastic containers. I think Petri dishes would work nicely for this. You could also just use a plastic cup. And I wash and rinse these plastic cups and reuse them for the soil unit over and over again. What they'll do is they'll have these different soils that they can put a little bit of into their container. And then they can add a little bit of their water to that. And then that was a lot of water. And then I'll have some paintbrushes out and about in the room as well that they can use to then mix. And they have a delightful paint. And they can make some different shades of paint. And we talk about how the different textures affect the way some of it paints. We talk about the differences in color. This is a great time to think about using descriptive language for those younger students. Then they have a really fun time painting all over their paper in using the different colors and making beautiful designs. Sometimes I give them an art challenge. Sometimes I let them just freeform it. And I will attach some photos of my students' setup and the students doing this, like my 6th grade students completing this activity. When they're done, the parchment paper can simply be removed from the table and disposed of during cleanup, or you can let them, if they want to save some of their art and take it home with them, I have scissors out and about as well, and they can cut out the picture of their art from the parchment paper and take it home with them. So this is a really fun activity, some good time for creative artistic expression, a great way to observe your different soil textures and colors and types of soil found locally or not if you're ordering soil. That follows an already messy activity of the soil texture by feel.
The link will be shared. It's on our YouTube Science Shorts page, which we'll make sure we get out to everyone. And feel free, if you have any questions for these teachers, feel free to email me and I'll get you connected and can share some of their additional resources with you. Pass back to Cory. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. All right, we're going to move on to our next presenter. This is Travis Waiser. He's a soil scientist with Natural Resources Conservation Service based out of Texas. Travis has a wealth of experience doing student education and outreach events from the perspective of a soil scientist out there working at workshops, different events, field days, that sort of stuff. So Travis, I'm going to turn it over to you to say hello and share your demos.
All right, thank you, Cory. My name is Travis Waiser, soil scientist in Kirby, Texas. I'm going to show a short video of activity that I do with 4th graders, and then when the video's done, I'll come back and give a few hints of what I do, or some thoughts I have for newer employees who haven't done a lot of this yet. My name is Travis Waiser. I'm a soil scientist in Kirby, Texas with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Today I'm going to demonstrate a soil demonstration that I do for elementary school kids here in Kirby. The typical age is going to be 3rd grade through 5th grade. And so the things that you need I have 4 different soil textures, 3 different soil textures and 1 gravel. I have 4 any kind of glass container. I have 4 graduated cylinders with 25 milliliters of water. I have 4 funnels. They're about 4 inches in diameter at the top. And I have 4 filter paper to keep the soil above into the filter, and these are about 6 inches in diameter. So I'm going to go through the demonstration and show you what I do for the students. So to begin with, is to get this first going is I'll put my funnels in these glass containers. Can be any size or anything that you have. On the filter paper, if you're not familiar with these, you take it, fold it in half, and then you fold it in half the other way, and then you open it up on one side. And I do use a little squirt bottle with distilled water just to kind of get them moist, so that when we add our water, that the water that drains through is actually going into our glass container and not being absorbed by the filter paper. If you don't have filter paper, you could use coffee filters, probably anything kind of filtered that's going to keep the soil, or at least most of the soil, in the funnel and not pass into, with the water, into the glass container. So I'll get these set up. I typically do this in front of the kids. That way they see that everything is done the same and that nothing varies. Had a little bit of water in there. So. Alright, that's the last one, all four of those set up. Then it doesn't matter necessarily exactly how much soil you put in each one of these. It's just that you put the same amount in each funnel. So normally this is about a teaspoon here, and normally I do 2 to 3. So 1, 2, and I'll do 3 today. So that's going to be our clay soil. This one is going to be our loamy soil. And then we have a sandy soil here. And then when we start talking about particle size and the size matters, I just like to use gravel just for a larger particle size. 1, 2, 3. And I'm using decomposed granite, but you can use any kind of gravel that you want. So now I have 4 setups of clay, loam, sand, and gravel of all about the same amounts. And now this is where, if you wanted to, a lot of times I have 4 kids come up and I have them pour the water to get them active in the activity. But for today, I'm just going to go ahead and pour. So we just pour 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you just give that a little bit of time to drip through. And then when we get done here, we're going to lift the funnels off and pour the water back into the graduated cylinder. The other thing that you can do sometimes is, if you want to color the water blue or green or red, just so it's more visible to the kids watching, you can do that. It's just sometimes the water is going to come out a little bit different color. So we'll give this just a little bit longer. Let them finish dripping. The reason why I do this demonstration is I talked to the teachers. They gave me some of the teaks that they have here in the state of Texas. And this kind of aligned and matched up with some of their 4th grade teaks. And so that's why I said this recommended for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade age here in Texas. And the teachers really like this demonstration, and some of them have taken it and used this demonstration in their own classroom now. Okay, it looks like we're mostly stopped, and so we'll just take the top off here. And I'm gonna pour this back into the graduated cylinder. And the kids can have a read, they can go ahead and take the reading as well. Looks like we are 7.5. And I'm gonna go ahead and write this on the board here. And I'll talk about the board here in just a second. So it's going to be 8.5 for the loam. Sand is going to be 14.5. Gravel. It's going to be 21.5. Okay. So this shows that the clay soil holds the most water, least amount runs through. The gravel and sand allow the most water, hold the least water, and allow the most water to run through. The reason why, a lot of times when I'm doing this demonstration, I'm doing several of these in a row, and so by the end, I keep a chart to talk about trend. Because when we're talking about science, a lot of times we want to talk about trend, because a lot of times these aren't going to be exactly the same results, but the trend will always be the same. And typically I'm talking about soil texture when I'm doing this. And so I link the size of the soil particles, clay being the smallest soil particle is the reason why it holds the most water, gravel holding the least amount of water because we have very large pores. And so when we're talking about soils, sandy soils are going to hold the least amount from a soil texture standpoint because those soil particles are large. And then loam is in the middle, because it is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay, and so it has the ability to hold some water, but then allow that plants to take that water up. And so the key thing here is clay's holding most soil, most water, sand and gravel the least amount, and this is important for plant growth and the soil storing water for plants to use. And then when I get done, I actually do save. I dry all the soils back down and regrind them and reuse them, so I'm not having to continuously find new soil samples. And so this is this soil demonstration that I do with typically 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders here in Kirby, Texas. And thank you for watching. All right, thank you. That's so that's kind of that demonstration. And then I kind of wanted to, hopefully y'all could hear that. Just some tips, if you're an NRCS agent or employee that's fairly new to giving talks, some suggestion I give to my new employees, slow down, don't get in a rush. They're taking in the information, so just don't go too fast. I like to involve the students by asking questions, getting them involved, seeing what they know, because some of them know it and they'll feel proud that they know the answers already. And so I like to do that. I like to relate the topics or relate soils topics to the things that the kids already know. So like when I'm talking about particle size, for the sandy soils, I like to use a beach ball because when they're at the beach, they can relate to sand. And so that's the large particles. For silt, I like to use either like a softball, baseball, or tennis ball because all the kids should know what that is. And then on clay, I like to use paper hole punches now because they're the smallest of all those that I've talked about and because they're flat and not round. And so I just kind of like to make those links on things that they already know. Something else that I like to do is ask the teachers, what kind of words and terminology they use. So like I've started using ecosystem in some of my talks, watershed, because that's some terminology that the students are going to need to know at some point during their school on tests and things. And then also relate why soils or other topics are important to them. So when I start talking about, why soils are important, I go back to, clothes and food, the air we breathe, the water we drink, and all those things that we use on a daily basis. And so that's very important. So that way they can make a link in soils and what we use every day. And then if you're a teacher, is what I would say is, reach out to your local NRCS offices, see who's available, make connections and see what's available and what they have, and maybe what connections they have as well that they could bring in to help teach soils and things about soils. And then also don't be scared. Like I told NRCS employees to ask the teachers what's needed. Don't be scared to tell them kind of specifics of what you're wanting so that we can meet the goals that you want the students to have. And it's because the way I look at it is if I can help the students the best I can, that's beneficial to them more than me just talking. So with that, that's about all I had. Cory, if there's anything else, or we can take questions at the end.
Any questions for Travis? Who else was like, oh my gosh, the marker's rolling off the table? Stop it. That was really good. That was a great demo. Okay, 2 questions for Travis. Put them in the chat. We're going to move on to our next presenter, Susan Chapman, Director of Special Projects and Staff Director for the Soil Science Society of America's K-12 Outreach Program. Suzanne, I hope you are ready to pop on and give us the chance to get Lauren back online and in the meeting.
Certainly. Let me share my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, wonderful. Great. I'm delighted to be here with all of you. So I'm the Director of Special Projects and the Staff Director for our K-12 Outreach Programs as one of the many hats I wear. So SSSA, the Soil Science Society of America, is a nonprofit international scientific organization with around 5,000 soil scientists and students around the world. Some of our key areas are our annual meeting, now known as Canvas, our peer-reviewed journals where people publish their research, our certified professional soil scientist certification program, and there's many benefits that help advance our members advance their careers and our sciences. So within that, SSSA has a K-12 outreach committee made up of about 15 soil scientists. And we're also honored to have several K-12 teachers on the committee as well. So we've been working for about 20 years to develop materials for our K-12 educators, curriculum developers, students, and really anybody who's interested in learning more about soils. So what I want to do today is walk through our website, our primary website for education, and it's soils4teachers.org. And I'll just start at the beginning and walk through some key highlights for educators to use. First off, you'll see our top navigation bar, which I'll go through in a minute. But some of the other key things on our first page is a glossary. And we have 2 different versions of the glossary. One is made from Soil Get the Inside Scoop book, which is really designed for grades 3 to 5 and has a little bit more basic definitions, and they all come from the book. The great thing is you can always browse by the letters to see if the definition is in here. We also have an advanced glossary that comes from the No Soil, No Life book, which is really designed for the high school Soils 101 type courses. And you can see these are a little bit more developed. We also have a soil store where you can, we have just a couple of things that we sell that help fund our outreach program. We have Soil Get the Inside Scoop, which I referenced, and No Soil, No Life. And probably one of the most fun things that people like to order are rolls of stickers. They're just $25, and they're great like little giveaways and incentives that you can use in your classroom. Here. Okay, so up to that navigation bar. First off is soil basics. And you'll see on our drop down, we have soil horizons, which we've done some research and found out consistently that the #1 reason people come to our website, first and foremost, is to get more information about soil horizons. They may be searching soil horizons, soil profiles. So we have created a whole page on soil horizons. And lots of different information here. We also have information on soil physical properties and the role of soils. Then if you go over to soils by subject, you'll see formation, biology, chemistry, all of these different topics. And I'm going to click into biology. And you can get more information about soil biology, what lives in the soil. And we've also gone through, I'll get to the lessons and activities database that we have, but we've also compiled lessons in biology, in chemistry, and soil formation all together so that you can simply click on this page link and it'll take you to all of the different topics within biology. Okay, then we have US and world soils. We have broad information about soils around the world. We have a whole page on soil types, and you can get information. You can click on pages to go to urban soils, desert soils, tundra soils, etc. We're also developing a hot topics in soil page. Right now, our first one is soils and flooding. We've just gotten that up. Written by one of our grad students. We are finalizing soils and fire. We're finalizing one on urban soils, and we'll be doing some other ones as well. We have a section on soils and people, and I know we've talked about that piece as well. Connecting not just the science of soil, but how it connects to people. You could talk about soils and culture through art. Gets to that painting with soil piece, how people have used soil with mud cloths, with pottery. And then we get to lessons and activities, sort of the heart of our website. We developed a database where you can go to search for over 150 at least lessons and activities. All of these, many of them are not ours. We have some that are ours. We have some that others have developed that they've submitted. Our soil scientists have reviewed and vetted them so that we all know the science is sound on them. And you can enter keywords. If you're interested in doing an outreach activity, you can say, I want activities that are suitable for that. If you want to find the materials that our committee has developed, you can click that as a checkbox. You can also search by grade level, by all of those topics. And is it an activity, a lab experiment? Is it a reading? We also have some webinars, teachers' guides, and videos. Missy talked about the NGSS standards, and you can also search by the standards and core ideas. So you'll just click on all of those, get to where you want, and you also have the ability to set up a binder. If you want to be able to review, save, add to, take away from binders that then you can use in your classroom, you can simply select to put things in a binder. You create a binder very simply by creating a login, and then they'll be back here when you come back. So in addition to the lessons and activities, several years ago, we worked collaboratively with NRCS and developed an in-service program, a day-long in-service program for K-12 teachers, both for their education and also for teachers then to use the materials in their classrooms. So key areas are soil basics and physical properties, so chemistry, soil biology, soils and climate change, and web tools and resources such as the soil survey, web soil survey. And each one of these has an overview, which is a reading, a PowerPoint that you can use in your classroom, including the notes section, and then various activities that correlate with the information provided in that PowerPoint. To get up to speed on each of the modules, we've also done a video for each one. We did that at an in-service we did in Chicago at DePaul University. So you can also review that, and that'll walk you through the whole video, the whole PowerPoint. And finally, several years ago, we also did a half-day in-service in Puerto Rico, and had many of the materials translated to Spanish, including the PowerPoints and the overviews and some of the activities, not all of them, but most of them. So that's a great resource for both you and your classroom. I've mentioned No Soil, No Life being at the high school Soils 101 level. And we also have developed an educator's guide for all of the chapters in the book. It's housed on the CERC site and is open to everyone. It has a chapter. Well, let me go in. It has it's all by chapter. It has some information in it. It has lessons. It talks about how you integrate with the book and terminology. So you can go to one of the topics. It has a summary, essential questions, big ideas, another PowerPoint, and printable materials that you can use and download. And there's more. Missy referenced the Soils Overview Unit we created several years ago, really designed for middle school. Again, lots of different topical areas. It is a PDF that you can download, but there are a lot of links within there that you can use. And we've also done several webinars that are available for you to listen to, and they are housed on our YouTube site. Finally, resources. We have a lot of different resources that are available for educators. I've talked about the stickers. We do contribute to the AGI Earth Science Week every year. We have developed a lesson for their calendar, and we have all of the years, the calendar activity and any supplemental materials that we've developed that correlate with that. We go to NSTA every year, the spring conference, not the fall conference, and we post the materials that we demonstrated at the both in the exhibit hall, and we also do a workshop. So we have all of the materials there. Free classroom materials. You can click on this, order materials. We've got some posters. We'll send some stickers. Send the General Soils Basics overview to you. The International Year of Soils, I'll point this out, it was in 2015. We did a video for every month on different topics: soils and agriculture, urban soils, soils and recreation, soils and climate, soils and people. And they're a couple of minutes long. Jim Toomey did the narration for us. They have some animation in them. So they're great for introducing topics in your classroom. And finally, I mentioned our 2 books that we have that are available. And this Soil, Get the Inside Scoop, we're on our 2nd edition. We just finalized it this summer, and we'll be updating a teacher's guide. Again, more PowerPoints with notes and some activities and quizzes that you'll be able to use in your classroom. And we'll be sending out an email to all of our teacher lists as soon as it's ready. So with that, that is my overview of our Soils for Teachers website and all of the resources that are available.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. That's awesome. That was the link is already getting some traction, and folks are asking about where they can find it. We do have a question about college level curriculum. Is there a good resource for college level? So if like NRCS people go into a college classroom where there's an invitation to college level work.
Yes, absolutely. I do know that some of our professors who are members of SSA use No Soil, No Life as a Soils 101 level textbook. And so I would recommend going to the No Soil, No Life educator site to assist with developing that.
Okay,
I got
thank
ahead of
you.
myself.
We're going to Lauren, who is going to be doing our web soil survey live demo. So back to Lauren, who's one of our excellent supporters who knows web soil survey in and out. I feel like you're an honorary soil scientist the amount of times I've seen you teach this section. So looking forward to your demo, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks, Cory. And I'll just start actually with thanking Travis for encouraging teachers to reach out to NRCS soil scientists. We've already heard from Julie, one of our teacher speakers today, and she actually just had an event with some teachers and some students and soil scientists down in Birmingham last week, actually. So really encourage, again, all the teachers, like Travis mentioned, reach out. If you're not comfortable reaching out to your NRCS office, feel free to utilize AGI. We're happy to help make that connection. And I know SSSA, or Soil Science Society of America, also has great ways to connect teachers with soil scientists. So again, just really encouraging you guys to make those connections. All right, and now we'll jump to our web soil survey. And as Cory has mentioned, we have shared about web soil survey a lot in different various forms of webinars, such as at the Earth Science Information Partners webinar series, Out to Lunch. So I'm happy to do a deeper dive with those of you that are interested, because I'm going to go quickly-ish today, since we don't want to spend so much time going through a platform that potentially a lot of you NRCS employees already know, but might be surprised to hear that we're encouraging teachers and students to go to use in their science education classrooms. And for those of you that are unsure or don't know Web Soil Survey, it is an interactive data platform that has a wealth and almost an overwhelming amount of valuable data and information. And with today's educational standards emphasizing the use of real-world data, thank you, Missy, for telling us about the science and engineering practice, which is analyze and interpret data. We at AGI focused on making Web Soil Survey as interactive as possible and as accessible to teachers and even to some students, which you might be surprised to hear that they have gone and explored. So hopefully slides are progressing and you can see everything. But this was our activity about permafrost, which I shared earlier. Again, just making sure that there's a hands-on component to engage students in the content, and then looking at related soil maps. And we really like to start off slow when we're using soil maps with teachers and students, and give them a sense of what a soil map looks like, and starting to read or make some interpretations about what they're seeing before we bump them up a level and really get them creating maps on their own. And so when we are asking teachers and sometimes even students to create these soil maps, we created guides so that they can, again, be more specific to how a teacher might utilize Web Soil Survey. Because as many professionals know, there's a lot of information which probably isn't applicable to teachers and students and what they're doing in the classroom. So our first guide is an introductory guide, which is based on a lot of the guides that are out there, but just really condensed to what a teacher might use. The first page is just really an introduction to teachers, and then the second and third and fourth pages could be included in student handouts. They could be used for the public, really for anyone. And then our second guide, which is new, is Understanding Soil in Your County. It takes users beyond the Web Soil Survey platform into the archived Web Soil Surveys, which are so valuable and contain a wealth of information, and helps users understand how their soil formed in their area. And then we have our Climate Dynamics Guide, which features relatable soil survey data that's available through the platform and can be useful in a classroom when talking about climate. So the guide talks about related data interpretations that are available, most importantly, how to get to them by specifically calling out which buttons to click. And then it gives some example maps, explanations, and activity ideas that teachers could do with their students. So just as an example, before we dive into Web Soil Survey, we're going to think about using Web Soil Survey in one of our curriculum, which was designing rain gardens. And so as most of us know, flooding is a common issue around the world, and understanding stormwater runoff and mitigation techniques is more important than ever. And so after introducing students to the problem of stormwater runoff, we talk about rain gardens, which are built to catch runoff and allow the water to enter the ground instead of picking up pollutants entering the storm systems and then going into our natural waterways. Also, soil is a natural filter, as most of us know, and it can help clean the water as well. And so as part of this curriculum, we talk about soils, and after introducing soil texture, which is the ratio of sand, silt, and clay particles, and can tell a lot of information about the soil, students often wonder, what is the soil around their school? This is when teachers can provide soil texture maps made through Web Soil Survey, or that we can guide students through the platform themselves. And then, as many of you predict, students would go outside, test their own soil, get their hands dirty as a check for what they see on the platform. Many times the soil is slightly different, and that always leads to great conversations of how the maps are made and kind of the details of the platform itself. So we are going to go into Web Soil Survey, and fingers crossed, my computer doesn't crash and neither is yours. And we'll quickly go through a couple activities that you could do with students, whether you're an outreach professional, a soil survey, or soil scientist going to the classroom, or an educator. And so let's hop over to Web Soil Survey. And if you've never been here, this is what it looks like upon entry. I'm going to zoom in briefly. There's some information, again, about Web Soil Survey, some quick basic steps, but also Sequoia will be putting a guide in the chat, which is one of those introductory guides that I shared. So we can click Start Web Soil Survey. And then we have our platform. And so the first thing you're going to do is select an area of interest. You can do that many different ways. The easiest way that we recommend for teachers is just clicking in an address. And then you can start typing in the chat. And so we work with students in Downers Grove, Illinois. And so I'm going to click View, select. I could type in the full thing, which would bring me right there, but I'm Downers Grove, Illinois. I click OK, and it zooms me right into where I am. I'm going to click the Zoom Out button just so you guys can get a sense of where we're located, which is around the suburbs of Chicago. You can see my little orange pin potentially if you have really good eyesight and see where we're located. I can either zoom back in or I can just select a box and then it'll zoom me right back into that location. And I can get pretty detailed in my selection of my area of interest, and that's what we're going to analyze with the soil maps. And so up here we have two ways to do area of interest, by rectangle or by polygon. For time's sake, I'm just going to do a rectangle, and I'm going to select an area. You'll see that there is kind of a blue hash mark, and that's showing me exactly the area I've selected. If I didn't want to have that much detail, or sorry, that large of a space, maybe I want to get into the school and just really look at our community, I can clear my area of interest with this button over here on the left toolbar. It goes away. Maybe I want to zoom in a little bit further. Whoops, not that far. And I can see the school kind of popping up. So maybe this is the area of interest I really want. So I'll select once again, area of interest, and I'm selecting the area I want to explore. Once I've selected my area of interest, I can go up to the soil map, and I can actually start to see, I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so we can get a better picture. I can start to see the different soil types around my community, and they're all listed over here on the left bar. Initially, right now, we're going to kind of skip this. It's not as informative to some teachers and students right off the bat, so we're going to come back. First, we'll skip to the Soils Data Explorer, which is this third tab up at the top bar. And there's a bunch of different options. The Intro to Soils is kind of a background. It's a great place to start if you have questions, if you want to know more about soils. The suitabilities and limitations gets back to your area of interest, and you can click on different categories to learn more about the soil. We're going to stay focused on that soil texture because we're students and teachers thinking about where's best to design a rain garden after we've done a little experimenting with the different textures, including obviously clay, silt, and sand, and the different combinations. And so we're going to go to soil properties and qualities, soil physical properties, and then a whole bunch of different options pop up, including surface texture. And again, in our guides, we say, click here, click here, click here, just so you get there, because as you can see, there are so many interpretations that teachers and students could definitely get lost in, for better or worse, of course. So I'm going to click surface texture because that's what I'm most interested in. I'm going to click, you can click view description, and you're given some text about what surface texture is, the description. I'm going to click view rating to see my map. And this is what I could give students to look at. There's a couple things that we could do with this map before printing it for students. The first is you might notice there are some labels on there. Sometimes those are distracting to students. If we don't want those labels, especially if you have a broader view, more area, those labels can kind of junk up the graph. You can't see the colors as much. And so you actually can click the legend, which is a little bit hidden over here in the top left, and we can see all these features that are included. I don't necessarily need to include the lines, the points. I don't care as much about including transportation right here. I can change my background to a topographic map if I would like, or keep the aerial photography. But I also can get rid of some of these labels, and this is a little bit hidden, is you can right click and you can edit layer properties. So I can make those labels larger, or I can get rid of them altogether. I also can change the, like making it more opaque so I don't get as much of that background image, and I can click OK. And then you see the map adjust from there. So this is the soil map I want my students to look at. I would then go ahead and you could do a printable version or an add to shopping cart. Even though it says shopping cart, it's free. It just compiles all of your different maps into one document. I usually recommend to teachers to just do the printable version because, as you've seen, there's a lot of things that could make your computer crash in web soil survey, and that typically happens for me sometimes when I've overloaded my cart with too many maps. So I have my map here I could share with students. And on the second page is that legend, where I can see which polygons are actually labeled. And so this is something that I've done with students and different teachers around the Chicago area. We do our rain garden curriculum, and specifically students have utilized these maps when they're making arguments to administrators of, we need a rain garden and this is why, and here's our topography, this is all of our land cover, we have a lot of impervious pavement, here's our soil type, and this is why it's best to put the rain garden here. So again, a really good tool that students can use to back up some claims using their evidence. So another way that you could utilize web soil survey, which I'll jump to next. And again, before I jump on, I guess there's so many other things you could look at. We have, if you're thinking about flooding still, there's water management. We can look at how the, like if it's going to flood, and I think that's actually back on soil properties and qualities, but it's definitely worth poking around, seeing which interpretations might be most useful to your classroom. And so if we really want to learn more about the soil in our community, so not just what's the texture and does it flood, but really what is the soil and how did it form? We can go back to that soil map and you can click on the different types of soil. So let's say we're most interested in 330A. That's located right here. Right here, perfect. The silty clay, I can click on it. And then I have a lot of information about the soil itself, the landscape, the parent material, the typical profile. And there's a lot of other applications too that you can use to look at typical profiles of where you're standing. And again, just some more information. But again, this probably is overwhelming until you've kind of got more of a sense of the soils in your area. And what you can do to learn more about those soils is go to the archived soil surveys. And Sequoia is going to put another link in the chat, which helps direct people to finding the soil surveys. And it really helps look at how the soil formed. And so we can look at the climate, the organisms, the relief or the parent material, and the time it takes. And hopefully I got all of those soil forming factors. And so when I am brought to the archived area, I can go to the historical soil surveys. And this I would recommend probably just adults doing. I don't know if students this would be as helpful for them in a classroom. But again, it's helpful for you to understand the soil in your area, and you can adjust it to being presentable for your students. As I mentioned, I'm in Illinois. I'm going to go to DuPage County because that's the county where that location was, Downers Grove, Illinois. And I have 3 soil surveys that pop up. I'm going to hover over them to figure out the year. So I have one that was published in 1979, one that was published in 1999, and one in 1917. I'm going to go to the most recent, which is the 99 right in the middle. And tons of information, a lot of information. And here I've already jumped through where I need to go because it automatically popped up. But there's 291 pages about the soil in DuPage County. Don't know if you have the time to read a whole soil survey. And so one of the cool things that I found, and Cory shared this with me last year, was that really someone's already broken down, right, how the soil formed in your area and the history of why the soil is the way it is. And so you can utilize that information by going to the sidebar. And if we really want to focus on soil formation, I can type that in to the search, press enter, and then I'm given many results that I can dig through, 974. Not sure if you want to dig through 974 results, but I really, again, not just interested in soil because you can see how it pulls just soil, but soil formation. So I can put quotes around it to really pull just that phrase. And then I can jump right to the formation and classification of soils, which again is great background knowledge for you as an adult when you're teaching about the soil in your area, to have this background knowledge about how did the soil form in your area and what are the important soil forming factors. So as you can see, I'm going to turn off the search bar just so I don't have anything highlighted. But we can see the formation of soil. A soil scientist has written this and has given their knowledge about the area. And you can read about, again, the formation, the parent material, so those corked, the soil forming factors, the climate, the living organisms, the relief, and the time, and then goes to the classification. So again, great spot for you to go. In addition to the Web Soil Survey platform, is to actually go into those archived soil surveys and digging around. And with that, I will just throw back up this slide and say thank you. And if you need any more support utilizing Web Soil Survey, of course, your soil scientists can help. Anyone, NRCS can help, SSSA can help. They have really great resources related to Web Soil Survey, and AGI is happy to help as well. But really, hopefully we can integrate soils data into the really hands-on and fun components that teachers hope to do in the classroom.
All right, thank you, Lauren, for that expert Web Soil Survey demo. Let's all give a round of applause. Anytime anyone does Web Soil Survey live, they're taking the chance that it's not going to crash because it is a big website. I also always recommend that people wonder, why is it moving so slow? Why is it kind of clunky? Well, you have to think about that across the entire United States. There's a very detailed map, and you drew one little rectangle around your yard, and it is going to this massive behind-the-scenes database, and it is pulling the data just for that little space in the world that you asked it to talk to you about, and it's customizing everything for that little space. And that is a huge amount of behind-the-scenes processing that has been up and functioning and works pretty well if you're a little patient with it for a long time now. All right, that concludes all of our set agenda. So let's go ahead and give our speakers a round of applause. Really appreciate all of them coming out today, our partners, and this will be opened up to questions. And I'm going to go ahead and start with a question I know many people have asked me about is the recording. So this entire seminar has been recorded. We're going to send it to our friends at AGI for a little TLC on the video. So they're going to make sure those videos get spliced in so there's good audio, good sound quality. And then it will get posted to the NRCS's Soil and Plant Science Division National Cooperative Soil Survey Partner Seminars playlist, which I'm sure we can get you a link in the chat for that. But since you registered, I have your email address, you and all the other folks who are going to be watching this in the replay. And so you all will be getting an email from me that has, when the video is ready and posted, that's going to have the link to the video. It's going to have links to the websites. It's going to have links to all the resources. We're going to put a whole package together for you for follow-up. Because this video needs a little TLC, it'll likely be towards the end of the week or beginning of next week that it gets posted, just because we need to do some work. So stay tuned for that. Really excited to put this together for you. And then I see, Susan, you have your hand up. Do you have a question, or would you like to help us kind of close out this as we, and if you do have questions, put them in the chat now and we will answer them. We have a little bit of time here at the end.
Yep, I forgot two things.
Oh,
One,
good.
We have state soil booklets that we developed. I'm sharing the screen again. So if you go to state soils, we did one for every single state, and I'll pick mine. You can just click on this map and you'll find out all about the state soil for Wisconsin, which is the Antigo silt loam, how it came to be, what it is, where it's found, what its uses are. We try to do some ecological landscape and give more resources and a glossary. So there's one for every state. And then the other thing that we have for teachers that'll launch in February is we have teacher supply grants. So we'll be giving to 10 teachers $750 a piece to buy supplies to do soils activities in their classrooms, or if they build a part of a greenhouse or whatever it might be. So that application process will open in February, and we'll be sending out information about that as well.
All right. So I'm not seeing any questions specifically in the chat. I'll give it just a couple more minutes for questions to come in. If you enjoyed this presentation, if you like learning about soils and you want to dig deep a little bit more into the data behind soils and the way that the National Cooperative Soil Survey works with our other federal partners like the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Service, universities, and extension specialists around the country, we have a regular series of seminars. Actually, our next one is going to be technical in nature, but we're going to be exploring problematic hydric soils and the new problematic hydric soils compendium that NRCS, National Technical Committee for Hydric Soils, just published. So we kind of span the topics from super technical to also outreach and education. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so we're going to go ahead and end the call today. Oh, wait, here we go. All right, for any of our educators on the call, has this materials gone well with inner city students and students who may be living in urban environments? Lauren, do you have experience with that one?
Yeah, we've worked with a couple schools in Chicago, specifically about their rain gardens. First, many of those students don't see soil. So like how Laura had shared, it's just important to expose them to soil and get their hands dirty because they're really not used to it. We've also done some soil sampling in like their school, really small schoolyards that they have, which has been eye-opening because they immediately run into a concrete block that was buried when the building was built. So there's a lot of great conversations that can happen about urban soil, and especially with Web Soil Survey. Right now, I don't know if it's been how the latest it's been updated, but there is like the national push to have the entire country mapped with Web Soil Survey, including urban areas. And so over the last couple of years, there have been a lot of resources about how to bring soils into urban areas. We have a couple activities that we have. And so if you want to email me, I'd be happy to talk with you more in detail about how AGI specifically brought soils into urban areas. And we've done a lot of work in Atlanta as well. So happy to talk more about with you beyond that.
All right, that looks like that was our only question. So we will go ahead and end the seminar. Thanks so much, everybody. You have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.